and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. Today, we're joined in the studio by Ola Rondiak. She is a well-known artist in the US and Ukraine. Her paintings stem from her family's experiences living in Ukraine during the historical events of World War II, Stalin's Iron Curtain, the Orange Revolution in 2004, and the Revolution of Dignity in 2014. Now, we're going to talk more about Ola's artwork. So, Ola, hello, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
You were born in the United States,
yes,
right? Your parents were immigrants from Ukraine. Now you're back in Ukraine with your husband and you're raising 3 kids here. Being a part of 2 totally different cultures, how did that shape your vision of the world?
Well, I grew up kind of with feeling very Ukrainian, culturally, spiritually, in America. So I think I was used to sort of this dual identity, so to speak. And coming to Ukraine, then we moved here the first time about 25 years ago. So it took some getting used to because the Ukraine that I grew up with was told by my parents and my grandparents, and so it was from their memory and their history, which was many years earlier from Western Ukraine. So when I arrived in Kyiv a few decades later, it was a little different and it required a lot of adjustment.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that you're doing totally fine now. What you do is that you try to popularize Ukraine around the world with your artwork. Do you see your life mission in cultural diplomacy?
Very interesting question. I think that's where it's leading to, and I think that I intuitively and through some maybe transgenerational pain and through all this identity process have come to understand that this is now my role and this is also my responsibility.
You've been here in Ukraine already through the revolution, the Orange Revolution in 2004 and the Revolution of Dignity in 2014. What are your impressions? What could you say about those historical times for Ukraine and Ukrainians?
Well, I think it was both revolutions obviously were incredibly moving. It was beautiful, really, to see how strong and resilient the Ukrainian spirit is. I think they very peacefully told their story that that the voices need to be heard, that you really can't suffocate a culture because it's important for these voices to be heard. And so I think that this strength and resilience has surfaced in my contemporary female portraits. And it has they've really become a metaphor for Ukraine.
Okay. You have an exhibition coming up here in Kyiv. Tell us all about it.
The exhibition is called Meetempsychosis.
Meaning?
It's a very interesting project, meaning the transition from one soul into another. So it's sort of needs to be looked at, I think, abstractly, in the sense that I personally feel that my grandmother's soul has sort of transferred into mine, and this is a grandmother who I've never met. This is my mother's mother, who she was separated from her family shortly after World War II. They were living in Western Ukraine, and my mother was only 11 years old and had to flee with my grandfather, who was a professor of Ukrainian language and culture. So they ended up being displaced people in Austria for about 4 years before they ended up in America. But my grandmother had been sent to Mordovia, to Russia, to a female labor camp. So unfortunately, they never saw each other again. But while she was in this labor camp, she created beautiful embroideries that when she was released, she smuggled them out. Somebody smuggled them to America, so we got hold of a couple of them. And so I started creating, when the Revolution of Dignity broke out, is when I started creating this contemporary icon reminiscent of what she had began, which we had an embroidery of an unfinished icon. So I took the long way around to describing the exhibit, but the exhibit is going to be simultaneously in Ukraine, in Kyiv, and also in New York.
Okay, so it's in a couple of days, right?
Yes, it will open on Friday, the 22nd in Kyiv, and on the 29th of December in New York.
Okay, we kindly invite everybody to go take a look.
Most definitely.
These beautiful paintings and these Matanga doll that we're having right now in the studio, is this a part of the exhibit, or is it just different types of your work?
These aren't exactly part of the exhibit because the exhibit's already in its location, but these are examples of my work, and I will have, this is a miniature Matanga, which historically was given from mothers to daughters as a talisman for good health and fortune. And so after the war, I created these Matangas in a contemporary fashion out of plaster of Paris, which is what we use to heal broken bones. So not only does it serve as a talisman, but also as a healer for centuries of pain in Ukraine. Yeah,
I can pretty much imagine what kind of feedback you could get from exhibits like these in Ukraine, but I do not know, and I would like you to tell me and our audience, what kind of feedback do you get when you have these exhibitions with these exhibits abroad?
Yeah, like you said, I think a lot of Ukrainians clearly can relate. They see something familiar for ancient roots and this connection from generations of the past. In America, it's also been a very welcoming and exciting audience, honestly, because I think that, you know, these issues that I speak about, identity, transgenerational pain, cultural significance, speaking for voices that aren't able to speak for themselves. I think these are very universal themes, and many other cultures can relate to it. And in America, we have such a plethora of different amount of cultures, and really it's just a humanistic themes and the strength of women, especially now after the Me Too movement in America, for female, the voices. It's a very strong theme.
I also know that you are the author of one of the murals here in Kyiv, in the Ukrainian capital. It's in the historic district of Kyiv, and now it is a prominent part of Kyiv's street art explosion. Now, this is a truthful success. So do you plan to continue working in this direction? Meaning, are we going to see any murals which you would be the author of around Kyiv in the nearest future?
Hard to say. I think that if I'm approached, I have a tendency of saying yes. So it's very possible, even though I didn't see myself as a street artist, nor do I claim to be, but the opportunity presented itself. I was invited to be part of this very exciting street art explosion movement. So I joined in, and so who knows, maybe there will be another one.
If not murals, what are your plans for the future here in Ukraine?
I think I mostly move very intuitively, so it's difficult for me to answer exactly what are in the plans, but I will continue to follow this trajectory in sharing our history and culture.
Okay, I mean, you've lived in Ukraine for a while. You've been told about Ukraine when you were a little kid. How do you perceive Ukraine now, at your age, with your experience? What do you think of modern Ukraine, of Ukraine these days?
I think Ukraine is a phenomenal country. Like I mentioned earlier, the strength and determination and hopefulness of the people and patience is really incredible. I mean, this country, since I moved here the first time about 25 years ago, and I've spent really the bulk of the last 25 years here. My husband and I raised 3 children here. We've seen incredible growth and changes. And of course, in the news, there are always things that, you know, will come up with how much work Ukraine still needs to work on. There's corruption. There's things that aren't finished
Ukrainians never give up.
But Ukrainians never give up.
Yeah,
it's a very strong nation, and the country has flourished so much. And I just look forward to seeing how much more growth will happen in the coming years. My children have since all moved back to America, at school and at work there, but they all talk about coming back. They feel like Kyiv is home, and it's a very special place.
When you take a look at the creative industry of Ukraine, creative industry of Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, how would you evaluate it?
The creative industry, how do you mean?
The creativity sphere in Ukraine, is it developed well enough? Or maybe has it been pushed down during to all of the situations that Ukraine has been through, the revolutions, the hybrid war with the neighboring aggressor country like Russia? Or do Ukrainian people are still remaining creative? Because Ukrainian nation is very creative.
I agree. I think the Ukrainian people and nation is very creative. Perhaps it's a difficult question for me to answer in a larger sphere of everything. I do think that, I have heard from some people, why do I keep bringing up the past in my art if this is contemporary art? But I think for some reason this is my fate, my destiny, and my way, I think, of bringing up the topic of what is contemporary art. For me, contemporary art, it's okay to reference, to make historical reference, and it's still part of the now. Right. And so this is how I see my art, and hopefully others will see it that way as well.
Well, I wish you all the best. I wish you all the luck, beautiful paintings. Good luck with your upcoming exhibit, and thank you so much for coming here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was Ola Rondiak. She's a Ukrainian-American artist. Thank you so much for watching Head to Head. Stay tuned with UATV for the